étrangères du Canada, je dois dire quelques mots en français. I know there's no translation from French, but we're a bilingual country. And I do want to start by really thanking Chancellor Merkel for inviting us all here and for having the courage to put this issue so firmly on the G20 agenda. It's really important, and kudos. It's a great question, and you're right that a strong view that Canada had, and that I know Ivanaka really championed in the White House, was that as part of the first meeting between Prime Minister Trudeau and President Trump, we wanted there to be an element of what we felt was a really shared agenda between the President and the Prime Minister, which was championing women entrepreneurs. And I think it was one of the most successful elements of our summit, this meeting of the Canada-US Women's Business Council. Look, I used to be a journalist. I'm familiar with the criticism of, why do you need more councils? You need to have action. And I agree with that. Of course we need action. But you do need a group of actors in order to move forward. And I'm very proud of the group of Canadian and US businesswomen who came together. They are working very hard. The idea is that the initiative would strongly come from them with support from our governments. And this is a group of very powerful, very dynamic, very creative women leaders. One of the issues that came up during that meeting was women's access to capital. And we've been talking about it very much in a developing world context, but one of the members of the council is a Canadian woman entrepreneur, and she said, you know what? It's just harder for a woman out there, even in Canada. We like to think of ourselves as an enlightened country. You know, our Prime Minister is a feminist. He appointed a 50-50 gender balanced cabinet. Yay for Justin Trudeau. But, you know, as Queen Maxima said, we are very aware that, you know, we don't have a female leader. I accept that, Chancellor. Touché. So, you know, as Queen Maxima said, we are very aware in Canada, I think in the United States too, that of course supporting women entrepreneurs, girls' education in the developing world is a great development tool, but we also have a lot of work still to do at home. And I very much believe that this Canada-US Women's Business Council is going to take a real leadership role on both fronts.
What we are also partly missing, Your Majesty alluded to that, referring to women not having IDs, for example, and we're missing figures and facts in lots of ways. So I would like to ask you, Madame Lagarde, from a macroeconomic standpoint, do the numbers, you know, on an international scale, tell a frustrating or a motivating story?
Both.
Would you embellish on that a little bit, please?
Promise.
Thank you.
Well, I want to say Dankeschön, merci beaucoup, thank you so much to the Chancellor, because you know, the first W20 that took place was 2 years ago in Turkey. To have it now in Germany under your leadership at the highest level of the country and under joint initiatives, as I understand, to have it promoted as one of the key items of the G20 agenda is fantastic. So thank you very, very much. And I would add that in addition to money that is needed for any initiatives, and you've alluded to that, Christia, and you too, Queen Maxima, we also need not just actors, we need activists. Because, to come back to your question, it's a really disappointing situation that we're facing. And at the same time, it can be really energizing and exciting because there's so much room for progress. You mentioned the 30% women entrepreneurs. Well, in low-income countries, it's even lower than that. As soon as you move to the medium-sized enterprises, it goes down to 20%. And if you look at how much access they have to financing, bank account, loans, it's about 2/5 of that 20% over 40 employees. So it's a really ridiculously small amount that can have access to financing. So that's number one. Number two, the point I would like to make in response to your question, is that it's an economic no-brainer from a macro point of view. because women's empowerment and participation in the economy are a triple bonus. Bonus number one, they boost growth. And everybody around the world wants growth, wants jobs. If you were to close the gender gap in the United States, the economy is automatically bigger by 5%. If you do the same thing in India, you're talking about 23%. If you do the same thing in Japan, you're talking about 9%. So there is, in all societies, whether they are low incomes, emerging or advanced, there is a bonus to be had by having women join the economy. That's bonus number one.
Who's missing the brain in not taking advantage of the no-brainer?
Let me get to the other two, because we have three bonuses. The second one is that by the same token, you reduce inequality. You reduce the gender gap, you reduce inequality. It is demonstrated empirically now by anybody, except a few heretics, that if you reduce inequality, you have more growth and it is more sustainable. So that's also critically important. Third bonus, you have a more diversified economy that has more exports, more trade with each other, and it's really also a growth booster. So from those 3 points of view, it's critically important to bring women to the table. Why don't they come? Well, I think we have something to do about it. And that's the energizing part. I will be activist for a second, if you allow me. There are at the moment some pension funds, some big investors who are saying to the companies in which they've invested, give us the numbers. Tell us what is the gender difference between salaries at the same level. And a lot of them are saying, oh, we're doing so much already, it's okay, we are heading in the right direction. No, give us the numbers. And then we can measure, and then we can move forward.
Mrs. Finucane, maybe we stick with the numbers for a moment, because there are studies, there is research that companies having women on board and in executive management perform financially better than those who don't.
True. And we're an example. We have 40% of our executive management team are women, 30% of the board are women. Almost 30% are also people of color. And that makes a difference because the conversation is different. And to even go back to something Krista just said, I do think that there is an importance to councils coming together, because it is difficult. I'll speak from a financial institution. When you're trying to make decisions like unsecured loans, as Queen Maxima just raised, you need to think about, in the financial system, how to de-risk something. That means syndicating that loss. That means coming together with other financial institutions. The piece today that Ivanka Trump and Jim Kim put out in the FT speaks to that, creating a fund of sorts. But the financial institutions, I think, are more prepared than ever, because we see the kind of growth, the kind of opportunity that Ms. Lagarde just spoke about. And of course, success begets success. And just in the United States alone, we've seen enormous growth with women in small business. They are more reliable. They will put more money back into the community. And for those reasons alone, it's important. But without the council, without the discussion about the practical issues of de-risking or syndicating both loss and profit, then it's very difficult to think that this is just going to take off. So although that can seem cumbersome, without it, it's not going to happen.
Mrs. Trump, your op-ed in the FT was just mentioned already. Before we get a little bit deeper into that, I would like to take a minute to clarify something. You're the first daughter of the United States, and you're also an assistant to the US President. As a part of the audience, especially the German audience, is not that familiar with the concept of a first daughter, I'd like to ask you, what is your role, and whom are you representing? Your father as the President of the United States, the American people, or your business?
Well, certainly not the latter. And I am rather unfamiliar with this role as well, as it is quite new to me. It has been a little under 100 days, but it has just been a remarkable and incredible journey. So as an entrepreneur and as an individual prior to this in the private sector, I cared very much about empowering women in the workplace. And the opportunity to have an elevated platform to be able to sit here on this stage, and thank you, Chancellor, for your very gracious invitation. I'm humbled to be here with so many formidable leaders to engage in dialogue, to learn, to bring the advice, to bring the knowledge back to the United States, back to both my father and the President, and hopefully that will bring about incremental positive change, and that is my goal. So this is very early for me. I'm listening, I'm learning, I'm defining the ways in which I think that I'll be able to have impact. I'm seeking the counsel, to use your word, of informed and thoughtful women and men. And I'm really striving to think about how best to empower women in the economy, both domestically and across the globe, because it's all interrelated. So it's been wonderful to date, and I have no doubt that coming out of this trip, I'll be all the more informed.
You wrote an op-ed in the Financial Times today where you wrote, "We know what works regarding women in business." And if we know what works, first question, why don't we do it? And the second question, are you sure that what works for you as a first daughter will also work for every other woman in the world?
No, I think we represent 50% of the population, so there is no one size fits all when you think about women in the workplace or women as job creators. And then you have the cultural overlay, which differs from country to country, from region to region, within countries. There are enormous problems. I feel fortunate in America that those problems are less than in other areas of the world when we think about gender inequality, but we still have formidable problems in our own right. When you think about the fact that 30% of U.S. privately owned businesses are women businesses, that leaves tremendous potential for growth and for engagement. Of that 30%, only 16% of those businesses have employees beyond the owner. So when you think about the potential women have, both to expand as entrepreneurs and to become more robust employers with our economy, it's incredibly exciting. There's a lot of wood to chop, and we're not right there. We're not there yet. And I think one of the interesting things is the problems are identifiable. We know what they look like, and they're the same across the globe, just with varying degrees of severity. The solutions and the tactical means to get to the right outcome will differ. And I think one of the great opportunities we have as we travel and as we talk to knowledgeable and informed people is to find out what's worked in their countries and cultures. I know that Chancellor Merkel, just this past March, you passed an equal pay legislation to promote transparency and to try to finally narrow that gender pay gap. And that's something we should all be looking at to see the efficacy of that policy as it gets rolled out. So this is a robust, dynamic, and ever-moving discussion. It's a political discussion. It's policy-oriented as we think about paid leave. Sadly, the United States is one of the only countries in the world, the only developed country in the world that doesn't have a paid leave policy for the benefit of families. So that is something I'm very, very proud of my father's advocacy. Long before he came into the presidency, but during the campaign, including in the primaries, he's been a tremendous champion of supporting families and enabling them to thrive in the new reality of
you hear the reaction from the audience. So I need to address one more point. Some attitudes towards women your father has publicly displayed in former times might leave one questioning whether he's such an empower for women. How do you relate to that? Or are things changing? Or what's your comment on that?
I've certainly heard the criticism from the media, and that's been perpetuated. But I know from personal experience, and I think the thousands of women who have worked with and for my father for decades when he was in the private sector are a testament to his belief and solid conviction in the potential of women and their ability to do the job as well as any man. So I think in my personal experience, and you were asking me about my role as daughter and also advisor, as a daughter, I can speak on a very personal level, knowing that he encouraged me and enabled me to thrive. I grew up in a house where there was no barriers to what I could accomplish beyond my own perseverance and my own tenacity. And I don't take that lightly as a parent now myself. That's not an easy thing to do, and he did that, and he provided that for us. There was no difference for me and my brothers. And I think as a business leader, you saw that, and as a president, you will absolutely see that.
We will be curious and watching. Thank you. Mrs. Leibinger-Camilla, you are an example how a woman can successfully run a business. You inherited and took over a long-standing family-owned business. Do you think you would have become an entrepreneur either way, regardless of your family history?
I don't think so. I have to be honest. And I'll switch into German now because Chancellor Merkel and I agreed that we are on German grounds and we are Germans, deshalb sprechen wir Deutsch. Also, gut.